Hello and welcome. This is the Phantasm Ball tutorial for CSCI 281 Pipelines for Interactives under Professor Scott Easley. This is your TA Jesse Bush for the fall 2010 semester, and let's just get right to it then. The first step we want to be sure about when we're working in Autodesk Maya 2011 is we want to make sure that the Maya is set up correctly for the tutorial we're about to go through. So, Step 0 of this step-by-step tutorial will be to set up Maya correctly. The things we need to be concerned of are as follows. First, we need to go up to the Create menu, go down to Polygon Primitives, and make sure to click on and uncheck Interactive Creation. Basically, it needs to look like this. Interactive Creation is a fun, very dynamic tool, but we're going very bare bones for this tutorial. So make sure this is turned off. The next thing you need to make sure of is you need to go down to the Animation Preferences icon, which is down here in the corner. Click on that. In the pop-up window that shows up, go and click on Settings. And in the Settings tab, we need to make sure that we're at NTSC, 30 frames per second. We aren't doing any animation for this project, but still it's good to make sure that this is set. And it's good practice to have for any project to make sure your working units are what they're supposed to be. Once we've changed that, we need to make sure we click Save so that stays changed. And now we should be ready to begin modeling the Phantasm Ball. The first step we have for modeling the Phantasm Ball will be to create the bottom sphere of the Phantasm Ball. To do this, we will first go to Create, Polygon Primitives, Sphere. Once we do that, we'll see a little sphere show up on screen. If we want to zoom into it, we can click the F key. We also will probably want to hit the 5 key on the top of the keyboard so that we have standard shading enabled. You can also enable standard shading by clicking on these buttons right here for wireframe, standard with wireframe shading. Alright, now that we have the sphere here, we need to make sure it is sized and scaled to the correct dimensions. To do this, we're going to go into the Channel Box and Layer Editor. If you don't see this, for example, if your window looks like this, go up to these 3 icons up here and click on the one on the far right. This will bring up the Channel Box and Layer Editor. In the Channel Box, with that open, we want to select the sphere we just created and scroll down this until we see the poly sphere under the inputs. Yours may not have a number 1 next to it, depending if you noodled around in Maya prior to starting this tutorial. Clicking on that, we'll see something for radius, subdivisions axis, and subdivisions height. We want to change these settings to 10, 18, 18. As you undoubtedly noticed, the sphere in your preview window has changed. So clicking back into your window, you can hit the F key again to focus in on the object. And we can see that we now have a much larger and slightly less high poly sphere to work with, and this will be what we will use to make the bottom of the Phantasm Ball. To continue with the tutorial, the next thing we need to do is delete the upper half of the sphere. To do this, we're going to go to Select, and we want to go in and put the world into face mode. This will allow us to select the individual faces or actual squares of polygons that make up the sphere. With that selected, we want to rotate around, and for those of you who have forgotten, camera controls are holding down the left Alt key for all of these, left Alt key, left mouse button, left Alt key, middle mouse button, left Alt key, right mouse button, or the other way you can zoom in and out is just using the mouse wheel if your computer has one. Now that we're through that little reminder, I'm going to use the View Cube, which is a wonderful thing that'll allow you to snap to different angles to get a front view of the sphere. And from the front view, I'm going to drag select the top half of the sphere. And then I'm going to hit the Delete key. I'm then going to click the Home thing on the View Cube, so that it will bring me back here. That way I can make sure that I've deleted only the upper half. If, for example, you've accidentally selected too much and deleted something below that halfway point, go ahead and hit Control Z, which is the undo button, for many things, including Maya. to bring it back, and when you have this selected, just do a quick spin around to make sure that you only have the upper half of the circle selected. Once that is done, you should be left just with this bottom half, which basically looks like a big cereal bowl. Now that we have the original sphere cut in half, it's now time we need to split some of the edges around it. To do this, we're going to use something called the Split Polygon tool. We can find the Split Polygon tool under the Edit Mesh menu, under Split Polygon tool. There it is. When you click on this tool, you also want to click on the little square box here. The reason we want to do this is we want to modify the tool settings over here. For this one, we want to make sure that the number of points is 1 and that the snapping tolerance is 100. This will basically ensure that as we're splitting the polygon, we will only be able to select halfway around the edge or right on the vertices. So with that done, we can then close the tool settings window by clicking the little X. We can then come into our half sphere, and along this edge here, we're going to first click. You should see a little square show up that is the first point in the vertex. We then want to go to the next one and keep clicking as we work around the sphere. If you make a mistake in this, for example, if I accidentally click down here, hit the Enter key to finish it, and then hit Control-Z to undo. You need to undo because otherwise you'll be leaving weird vertexes on your sphere. Still, as we go around, we just want to keep clicking in the middle of this first edge. First ring of edges, I should say. Eventually we'll come all the way back around, and then all we need to do is click in the same place, and when we're done and we've made that loop, click Enter. We now have this new edge loop around the sphere. The next step we need to do is we need to delete some of the faces. So we need to go to Select, Faces, and then we want to select every third face. So as you can see here, I'm selecting one, then skipping two, selecting one, and then skipping two, so that you should see that pattern all the way around the circle, and it should line up if you did the correct amount of divisions around the height. Once you have those selected, hit the Delete key. We now need to go back into Edge mode and select one of the edges. Then we want to go back up to Select, do Convert Selection, and then we want to go to the Edge loop. This will select the outer edge of the half sphere we have here. With those selected, we will now finish off what is the last bit for creating this this part of the phantasm ball by going up to Edit Mesh and Extrude. Again, that's right there. Don't click it again though. As you notice here, for some reason my GUI thing is really big. To change the size of your GUI tool, you can use the minus button on the keyboard or the plus button. This is good for getting it just the size you need for a given item. Now that we've extruded the edges, we want to click on the Scale tool over here. And with the Scale tool, we want to pull in about 2 units. So if we look right here, we can see there's the outer edge, there's the inner edge. We want to pull it in about 2 units. 2 grid units, so something like that. With that done, we can then go to Select, Object Component Mode, and we have finished making the first half of the phantasm ball. It's now time for the second step of the phantasm ball tutorial, which will be making the top half of the phantasm ball's main body. Before we do that, however, I'm going to save what I've done so far. It's not much, but we're still going to get into a good habit of saving. You can use the Save As dialog to navigate to where you want to save it. For me, it's in a folder on the desktop. Then we're going to give the file a name. and make sure to put a number after it. Since this is the first time I'm saving this project, I'm going to put a 1. When you're working with Maya, you want to save in versions, because otherwise Maya will break your heart. I'm sure Scott easily will inform you of this plenty times while in class, and I'm betting about at least a fourth of you will get to feel Maya's cruel hand when it decides to crash on you in the middle of a project. So save in versions, save often. We also need to make sure that we're saving a Maya ASCII. The reason we want to save Maya ASCII is this will allow us to pull it into older versions of Maya by modifying the files slightly. And we can only do that when they're in text format, thus Maya ASCII. Once that is all done, I'm going to click Save As you should too. And thus we have our first save of the Phantasm Ball. Now that we've saved, I'm going to take this sphere, and now I notice it's still called P-Sphere 1. While that's normally something we wouldn't necessarily need to worry about, for this project we're doing everything exactly how we should, and we don't want to leave things with their original Maya-generated name because it's not very descriptive, and thus we don't know exactly what it means. To change the names of any objects, we can go to Window, Outliner, and in the outliner, you'll see the item is already selected. Just double-click, and you can type in a new name for the item. You want to get in a good habit of this because keeping things named appropriately in any scene will help you keep it organized and not make you click around looking for whatever piece of geometry you're looking for. Now that we've got the Pball bottom renamed, the last thing I'm going to do before I actually start making the next piece is I'm going to go to Layers. With this selected, I'm going to go to Layers, and they'll go Create Layer from Selected. Layers work just like layers. The layers in Maya work just like the layers in Photoshop. They allow you to partition things off into special groups that you can turn invisible if you want, make transparent, or make them act as references. And when they act as references, they are drawn in scene, but you can't select them no matter what you do unless you turn them back into normal operation mode. We're going to rename this layer by double-clicking on it, and I'm just going to call it Pball. And I'm going to use this layer as a storage bin for all the pieces I've finished. We've finished the bottom half of the Phantasm Ball. Thus, we don't want to mess it up when we're creating the other pieces. So since I've already added it to this layer, I'm going to then I can then turn it off or make it a reference so that I can't destroy any of my previous work. Now that my previous work is safe, secure, and saved, we can get on and create the upper half of the Phantasm Ball. Phantasm Ball's body, I should say. To do this, we're going to use another sphere as our base. So we're going to go up to Create, Polygon Primitives, Sphere. And like before, we're going to go into the channel box and layout editor. And again, if yours isn't there, like it is now, just click on this thing up here until it comes up. When the sphere is selected and I've got the channel box open, I can scroll down to here, and then I can change the settings to 9, 18, 18. Thus, yours should already look something like this. Remember, that's 9, 18, 18. Now that the sphere is properly sized, we can now focus on getting it shaped appropriately for being the upper half of the Phantasm Ball. To do this, we're first going to go to the Phantasm Ball layer, and we're going to turn it to transparency. This will allow us to see through the bottom half of the Phantasm Ball, but still see where it is thanks to its grayed out wireframe. Now that we can see the bottom half of the top sphere, we can go to Select, Faces, and then we want to delete the bottom half of this sphere except for this layer. We need to keep this layer here because it's visible from outside. It's an exterior face, where all these faces here are called interior faces. An interior face is one that can't be seen from the outside of the model. And for models, beauty is skin deep. We want to keep all the things we care about on the outside because anything on the inside will rarely ever get seen. Also, when you're doing this, be careful to not do exactly what I've done, and it's select too many faces. Thus, I've made this lopsided. If you select too many faces, you can hold down the left control key and drag select over the faces you've selected by accident, and that will deselect them. Now that I've got exactly the number of faces I want selected, I can hit the delete key and get rid of them. I'm now going to go back to the Pball and bring it back to the reference layer. so that way I can see it. And this is why we don't want to delete that one layer of the phantasm ball, because it is still partially visible. Now that we've chopped off the bottom for the top half of the phantasm ball's body, the last thing we need to do before this piece is done is we need to give the phantasm ball a neck. To do this, we'll go up to the top of the sphere, and since we're still in face mode, we can select the top ring of faces right there. With those faces selected, we want to go to Edit Mesh, Extrude. And now that they're extruded, we want to click the Move tool and drag them up. The thing is, we want to make sure we drag them up an exact amount so that the neck is exactly as long as we want it to be. To make sure we do this right, we're going to hit the space bar once and go into our quad view so that we can see the phantasm ball from perspective, top, front, and side. Then from the front or side view, take your pick, go in by holding your mouse over that window and pressing the space bar, then pan up to where this is, and that's using the left Alt and the middle mouse button. And you can see we now have grid lines here we can use to measure how far we're lifting this. And so we want to make sure we lift this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 units above where it is currently. Actually, it's 5 units and some, but we're just going to go for 5 units. Once it's at that height, we can go back to our perspective view by hitting the space bar a few times. And now we can hit the delete key, because those faces there are going to be inside the phantasm ball's head, and thus we don't need to worry about them. So we can hit the delete key and get rid of them. And that finishes the modeling for the upper half of the phantasm ball, at least its body. Now we're going to do our little bit of cleanup like we did with the phantasm ball's base by going into Select Object Component. That way we have the object itself selected. We're then going to go to Window, Outliner. We're going to rename it. And once it's renamed, we're going to go over to our layer, right-click, and do Add Selected Objects. That way, now both the top sphere and the bottom sphere are protected by the phantasm ball layer. Still, you may notice that something looks a little bit weird about this phantasm ball, specifically its neck. This is something that happens when you extrude faces. The sphere itself has something that's called smooth edges, while the neck is obviously comprised of hard edges, and that just determines how Maya is rendering the edges. So, to fix this, we're going to turn off the reference mode for the layer. That way we can select our top thing again. We're then going to go to Select Edges. We're going to select the top ring of edges for the neck. Then we're going to go to Normals and Soften Edge. When we do that, if we go to Select Object Mode again, we'll see now that the neck looks much smoother, which is exactly what we want for this model. And now that that's done, we can turn the reference back on for the phantasm ball layer, and we're ready for step 3. The third step in creating the phantasm ball will be creating its very Mario-styled pipes that we see on its 0, 120, and 240 degree angles. To create these pipes, we want to be able to see kind of work without having to work around the phantasm ball base. To do this, we can go over to the phantasm ball layer and click on the little V there. That will turn off the visibility of that layer. With the visibility off, we can then focus on making the pipes and only integrate them into the phantasm ball when we're ready. To start making the pipes, we're first going to use a cylinder as the base. So we'll go up to Create, Polygon Primitives, and we'll go Create Cylinder. We can then hit the F key to zoom in on this given cylinder. We can then go again to our Channel Box and Layer Editor as we did with the 2 spheres prior. And if it isn't up, again, this is the button you need to click. Go down to its Inputs area. And in the Inputs area, we want to set the radius to 2, the height to 10, and the subdivisions around the axis to 10. With that done, we've now got the cylinder we need to begin molding the pipes for the phantasm ball. The first thing we want to do is, the pipes aren't actually going to be 10 units tall, they're going to be 5. The reason we made them 10 is that we want to make the origin point of the pipe at the bottom. The one way we can do this is if we go to Select, Vertex. We can then select the vertexes, or the control points, at the bottom of this polygon, and then we can move them up here to where the 0y is and where the control point is. Still, doing this way will never be perfectly accurate because you're eyeballing it in a very small scale. To make sure that it's right where we want it to be, hold down the X key. When you do, you'll notice that the little square at the center of the move icon turns into a circle. And in case I used keyboard shortcuts in the past and I didn't mean to, I'm sorry, but in case you need to activate the move tool, you've got it right here. Still, that should be the first thing that comes up when you select on any object, and I don't think I've hit the keyboard shortcut, but I just wanted to be sure. With the move tool selected, we want to hold down the X key so that this becomes a circle, and this is our clue that now Maya is snapping what we're doing to the grid's units. We can then snap these vertices so that they're right at Y0, and when we go to select object component mode, the bottom of this cylinder is right where its control point is. The control point being this point where all the tools are focused. So move, rotation, and scale are all focused around the cylinder's control point. To Maya, that's basically like its center of mass, the one place that it takes as the very center of the given object. Now that we've made our pipe the right height, it's time to start modeling it. First, however, we're going to do a little cleaning. The underside of the pipe here will never be seen because it's going to be in an interior face for the model. So, we want to go up to Select, Face. We want to select these faces, and then we'll want to hit the delete key, but we want to make sure we don't select any other faces by accident. So if you selected some of the top faces as well, hold down the left control key and drag select, and that will get rid of that selection. So you should only have this part of the cylinder selected. With just this part selected, we're going to hit the delete key so we get rid of those. Now that those are gone, we're going to rotate the camera up so we're looking down at the top of the cylinder, and we're going to select all the faces on the top. Again, making sure we didn't select any of the faces on the side. We're then going to go to Edit Mesh, Extrude, and once we've extruded it and this weird tools come up, we then want to go and use the Scale tool, and we want to scale this out a little bit. Just about that much. Then, with those faces still selected, and if you deselect them like this, you can hit Ctrl-Z to grab them again. With those faces selected, we want to then go Edit Mesh, Extrude, and this time using the Move tool, we want to lift this up. Give it that little lip. One more time, we're going to hit Edit Mesh, Extrude, and we're going to use the Scale tool again to bring this in. Now, one thing we need to be sure of is that this inner ring of cylinders is narrower than the rest of the pipe. The way we can be sure of this is if we hit the space bar and go to our quad view, we can then go to our top view camera. We can go to our top view camera, and we can see that our current faces are just within this ring here, and this ring here is the outer edge of the pipe. So we want to make sure that it's got a little bit narrower. It's a little bit narrower than the actual outside of the pipe. Once we're sure of that, we can hit the space bar again to go to the quad view screen, and holding the mouse over to the perspective view, we can go back to our perspective view. Now that we're sure that this is the right size, we're going to hit the extrude option one more time, and this time we'll use the move tool, and we're also going to hold down the X key so that we're using grid snapping, so that we can bring this face all the way down so that it's even with the bottom of the pipe. With that done, we can then hit the delete key to get rid of those faces, and we've finished modeling our lovely little pipe. Now, like the neck of the phantasm ball, if we go to select object component mode and we deselect the object by clicking anywhere in the empty space, we'll notice that it looks very square. It doesn't look very pipe-ish. To fix this, we need to soften the edges on this model like we soften the edges on the neck of the pipe. To do this, we want to go select the pipe. We then want to go to Select Edge. Once we have Select Edge, we want to click on a given edge. We then want to go to Select, Convert Selection, and we want to go first to the edge loop right here. This will select all the edges along that loop, which is all the edges that line up together. Once we've done that, we then want to go to Select, Convert Selection to Edge Ring. That way we have all of these edges selected, but we don't have any of the lateral edges which we want to remain hard and hard looking. With all these edges selected, we can then go to Normals, Soften Edge. We can then go to Select Object Component and then click off of our object. And now this pipe is looking much smoother thanks to the softened edges. With that done, we've now finished modeling the pipe, and now all we have to do is get it into position. So first, I'm going to select the pipe, and I'm going to make sure I have the Move tool selected. I'm then going to pull the tool up so that the pipe's above where I think the phantasm ball is, and then I'm going to go back to my layers and turn on the visibility for the phantasm ball. I'm then going to lower the pipe so that its bottom is just starting to stick into the rest of the phantasm ball. You should notice that it's got about the same height as our neck. That was done by design. Once we have the pipe like this, we need to move its control point back to the origin. That way we can position it more easily around the sphere. To do this, we're first going to turn the phantasm ball from reference mode to transparency mode by clicking on this icon right here. When a T is shown here and you can see through it like this, you're in the right mode. With that mode selected, with that mode on, and with our pipe selected, we need to hit the Insert key on our keyboard. You should notice your GUI tool shift into this weird, kind of like a move tool looking thing without the arrows and with this big yellow dot in the middle. We're now modifying the position of the cylinder's control point and not the position of the cylinder itself. We're going to hold down the X key to do grid snapping, and we're going to grid snap this control point back down to the, where'd it go? Back down to the very origin of the world where these black line crosses at 0, 0, 0. Once we've done that, we can hit the Insert key again to lock it in place. And now you'll find, if we switch over to, for example, rotation mode, the pipe now rotates from that origin point instead of around itself like it would originally. This is how we're going to be able to position the pipe on the phantasm ball with greater ease. Because now, all we have to do is we need to grab the red control reticle, which represents the X values, and we want to rotate this back so that the X is a -45. To make sure we do this precisely, if you have your channel box and layer editor open, you can type in a number directly here to set the value. So if this isn't open, make sure to open it. Again, you just need to use this icon here, right here, and we can set this directly to 45, -90, some weird number, but for this exercise we want it to be -45. With this at the -45 position, we've got one pipe in position for the phantasm ball. The thing is, we need 3 pipes, however. And there's no easy way to reposition this pipe without rotating it up and rotating it back. So the way we're going to position this pipe is we're going to take advantage of Maya groups. So I'm going to open the window outliner, just so I have it open during this exercise. And then we're going to, with this object selected, go to Edit, Group. A group is kind of like a mesh, but it has no geometry, and it has no geometry, and it can still rotate, translate, and scale anything that it's a parent of. If we look in here, if we click the little plus sign, we see that the cylinder is a child of the group. I'm now going to take this opportunity to rename these things to pipe, group, and to pipe. The reason I'm doing this is now I can duplicate this group and that way position the other two pipes I need for the Phantasm Ball. To duplicate something, we need to go up to the Edit menu and click on the Duplicate option. When we do that, you'll notice in the outliner a second copy of our original group has been created. We can then, if I move the outliner out of the way for a moment, we can then rotate this new group around the y-axis here and use it to position the pipe where we want it. For this instance, we want to position the pipe at y120. Then we can go Edit, Duplicate again, create another group. As you can see in the outliner, there's another group with another pipe in it. And then we can rotate this group around and put it at 240. Thus, using the groups, we have ensured that the three pipes we have are all sitting at 45-degree angles like they should be, and that they're spaced evenly around the Phantasm Ball. And since I've already named them, the last thing we need to do is we need to select the groups, and make sure to select the groups, because if you select them, you'll also grab the pipes. And then we want to right-click on our Pball layer and do Add Selected Objects. If you've done it right, you'll notice that they go gray like the rest of it. But if we want to see everything in reference mode again, all we have to do is click on the little T, make it a little R, and we're in reference mode again, and our Phantasm Ball is shaping up pretty darn good. And we're ready to begin the fourth step of modeling the Phantasm Ball, which will be modeling the Phantasm Ball's head. To start, we're going to do what we did on several other parts of the Phantasm Ball, and we're going to turn off turn off the visibility for the Phantasm Ball layer. To do this again, just click on the little V, and it goes away. With that now out of the way for the moment, we can begin modeling the Phantasm Ball head, and to do that, we're going to use a cylinder as a base. So we're going to go up to Create, Polygon Primitives, and we're going to create a fresh cylinder. With the cylinder selected, hit the F key so that we can get in nice and close and get a good look at it. And in the Channel Box Layer Editor, again, if this is closed, you can click on this icon up here to get it open. And with it open, we want to scroll down to the inputs like we've done before. Open the polycylinder's values area, and we want to set the values for a radius of 2, a height of 3, and a subdivisions around the axis of 12. With those values set, we then will need to turn the cylinder on its side. To do this, we could use the rotate tool, and just rotate it down like so. Again, the rotate tool is over here on your left-hand side of the screen. But this is going to be very inaccurate, and we need this to be right at 90 degrees. So to make sure it's right at 90 degrees, we are going to go back over to the Channel Box Layer Editor. We're going down to the Rotate X value, and we're going to make sure that's set to 90. That will ensure that it's at a nice, perfectly flat 90 degrees. With that set, we're now ready to actually start modeling and molding this cylinder into our Phantasm Ball's head. To do this, we're first going to go to Select and go into Face mode, I should say. With the object selected, then we're going to drag select the back faces. And if you select the side faces like I did, you can hit the left control and then the drag to deselect those faces, so that all you should have selected is the back cap of the cylinder. With it selected, we want to hit the delete key. Next, we want to go up to Select, go and shift it into Vertex mode. And while in Vertex mode, we want to grab the back ring of vertexes. And using our Move tool, again the Move tool is over here on the left-hand side, we want to hold down the X key for grid snapping, and we want to grid snap those vertices so that they're right at the origin point as so. With those moved, we are now ready to start extruding the faces we need for our Phantasm Ball's head. So since we're going to be extruding faces, we need to go back into Face mode. Again, that's through the Select menu and enter Faces. When you're in Face mode, we want to drag select the entire front cap of the Phantasm Ball's head. And with that selected, we want to go to Edit Mesh, Extrude, and with those faces extruded, we want to use the Scale tool, and we want to scale them down to about this size. Once they're at that size, we're going to extrude the faces again. This time we're going to use the Move tool to pull them out till about here. So about half a unit. You can actually, if you want to be exactly precise, we can use grid snapping here by holding the X and make sure that we are right at that half unit mark. Then we're going to go to Edit Mesh, Extrude again, and we're going to use our Scale tool again to extrude these faces, to stretch these faces out, I should say, so that they're about the size they were originally. Doesn't have to be exact. Should be close though. And then we're going to extrude these faces again, and we're going to use our Move tool to pull them out. Probably about half a unit, I'd say. That's going to be more of a guess than anything else, but a little creative license here is encouraged. We're going to then go to Edit Mesh, Extrude again. Doing a lot of extruding on this. We're going to use the Move tool again to pull this out about a full unit. So from half to about half. And then we're also going to use our Scale tool to scale it down so that we have a somewhat of a sloped edge. And then we're going to use our Extrude tool one more time to extrude, and then we're going to use the Move tool, again the Move tool is over here, to push these faces in. And that will finish the basic modeling for the Phantasm Ball's head. But now we have to do an operation called Booleans so that we can make the eye sockets for the Phantasm Ball head. But before we do this, I want to make sure everyone gets in the good habit, so we're going to save the scene again. So I'm going to go to File, Save As. This is going to be my second version save. You want to, again, stressing the point that you want to save in versions, because if you don't, Maya will break your heart. So once that's saved, and the reason I'm specifically saying you should save at this point is because we're going to be using something called Boolean operations, and Boolean operations are not the most stable function in Maya. Unlike moving, scaling, and translating, they can break, and when they do break, they can destroy what Maya is doing. So we want to be extra careful when we're using these tools. To make the eye sockets, first we're going to go to Create, Polygon Primitives, and we're going to use a cube. We can't see the cube on screen, but if we hit the F key, and then we rotate around, we can see our cube is there. We'll want to use the Move tool to get the cube nice and out here a ways. And once we have the cube here, we're going to want to scale it into the shape of the Phantasm Ball's eye sockets. To do this, we're going to use our Scale tool. And we're going to, or we can use the scale options here in the P-Cube's channel box layer editor. Again, if this isn't open, you can click on this. And I'd say we want to make the X scale about 0.3. We want to make the Y scale about 1.5. And we want to make the Z scale about 2. Actually, scratch the 2, 1 will work just fine. And those are actually really thick eyes, so I'm going to make it a 0.2. Sorry about the slight switch, but doing this a bit from memory. So with this cube prepared, we're now going to use this cube as a cookie cutter to make the Phantasm Ball's eyes. So to do this, we're going to first use our Move tool to move this eye over here to about a negative 0.5x, and to make sure that it's right on there, we can modify the translate x value and make sure it's right at negative 0.5. We're then going to go to Edit, Duplicate, so that we can have a second copy of this cube, and we're going to change its translate x to positive 0.5. Then we can shift select, which is holding down the left shift key and then just clicking on what else you want to select, so that we have both cubes selected. And using our Move tool, we're going to sink them down inside the Phantasm Ball's model. And to make sure we have them semi-sunk to similar sides, I'm going to set the Z translation to 3 for these cubes. Actually, 3.2 will be probably a good depth. You should see the cubes kind of interpenetrate into the Phantasm Ball's head. And now this is where we're going to get to the Boolean operations. The Boolean operations will allow us to use these cubes to make a cookie cutter hole in the Phantasm Ball head mesh. To do this, we want to first select the Phantasm Ball head itself, then we want to shift select the Phantasm Ball eye. That will make the head mesh turn into a white wireframe while we have a green wireframe for the eye. We then want to go up to edit mesh, just mesh, booleans, and we want to do the difference. When we do that, you should see that the cube we just made now forms the eye socket for the Phantasm Ball. This is exactly what we want to happen. If, however, we do it the other way, so if I select the other eye and then select the head, and we do the mesh booleans difference, you'll see we get a very different result. So when doing booleans, you need to make sure you have the thing you want to make the hole in selected, and then the thing you're using to make the hole. And also, when you're using booleans, whatever you're using to make a hole, like we're using the squares for the eye sockets, it will be destroyed. So if it's something you don't want to destroy, make sure you make a duplicate of it before using the Boolean operations. Still, since we're just using these squares to make the eye sockets, we don't need to really save them. So I'm not too sad about destroying them. So with the head selected and then the other eye selected, we are going to go to mesh again, go to booleans, and then go to difference. You want to do each eye separately because booleans are meant to work on 2 meshes at one time. It doesn't know how to handle 3 meshes at the same time. Now our Phantasm Ball has a lovely pair of eyes, but if we look here in the wireframe mode, we can see that we have some weird lines crossing the eyes. Those are the original spokes to the cylinder's cap, and this leads to some illegal polygons. An illegal polygon being any face, like if we go to select face mode for a moment, this face, for example, is an illegal polygon because it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 vertices that make up its shape. And the legal polygons can only have 3 or 4 vertices that make up its shape. Basically, you can only use triangles and squares in Maya. Anything more than that, and you will risk breaking whatever game engine you're going into. So to fix this, I'm going to go to Select, and I'm going to go into Vertex mode. And while in Vertex mode, I'm going to select the vertices here, make sure I'm using the Move tool, and then I'm going to hold down the V key. The V key will allow us to do vertex snapping. And while we're doing vertex snapping, we can drag these up and make sure that each vertex is right on top of one of the corners of the box. So if I can get a hold of this other vertex, we can drag and make sure that these vertices are right on top of the cube's vertex at the square there. We're going to keep doing this for all of the vertices. So that we have some nice clean lines and valid polygons. And you'll see right there I accidentally selected too many polygons and I grabbed some from the back. And you can see that led to a very weird result. If this happens, make sure to hit Control Z, get back, and just be more careful about how you're selecting the triangles. If you're having a lot of trouble, don't be afraid to use the selecting tool and select the exact vertex you want by just clicking on it, and then going back to the Move tool. So again, to make sure I get these vertices right on top of each other, I'm using the vertex snapping, which is done by holding down the V key while you're moving these vertexes. We're going to do this for both sides of this lovely Phantasm Ball head. And once you have that done, it should look something like this. And this is something that has valid polygons because, for example, this is a 4-sided face, this is 3, this is 4, 4 technically because there's a vertex right there, 4, 4, 3, 4. All of them have either 3 or 4 vertices that make up their shape. But even though we've put these vertices on top of each other, the other faces are still there. They're just now squished between the lines. To make sure that it's actually doing what we want, we're going to go up to select, go back to object and component mode, and with our head selected, we're going to go to edit mesh, and we're going to do merge. But before we do merge, we're going to click on the little square beside it and make sure. This is the threshold. This is how close 2 vertices have to be merged. Since we set our vertices just now right on top of each other using vertex snapping, this low value will work just fine, and the vertices should be merged. So I'm actually going to show you guys one thing before that. I'm going to go up to my display. I'm going to go down to, UI elements. No, it's heads up display, and I'm going to turn on my polygon count for just a sec. If I go into select vertex mode and I select one of my corners, you'll see that there are 6 vertices that are associated in that corner. That means there are 6 vertices sitting right on top of each other. But once we do merge, so we're going to go back to object component mode, and we're going to do our edit mesh, and we're going to do our merge. If we then go back to vertex mode and we reselect that same corner, you'll notice that this number here has dropped to a 1. That means those 6 vertices have become one single point on the mesh, and that's exactly what we want. So with that done, we can then go back to object component mode. I'm going to shut off my poly count display for a moment, and you can shut this on and off by going up here. And now the final step we need to do, the final 2 steps we need to do for making the Phantasm Ball's head complete is first we'll need to mirror the geometry, and then we'll need to make sure our edges are smooth. So to do the mirroring geometry, make sure to have the mesh selected. We're then going to go up to mesh, not edit mesh, but actually the mesh menu. And we're going to go down to the last option, which is mirror geometry, and we're going to click on the little square so that we get the options dialog. The options dialog allows us to select on which axis we're going to mirror the geometry. Since our geometry is facing forward on the positive z, we want to duplicate it across the negative z-axis, and we want to make sure that we're merging it with the original so that we have one solid geometry object instead of 2. Once you've verified that these settings are accurate, we're going to hit the mirror. And you'll see we now have all of our work duplicated over to the other side, and we have what looks like a fairly nice Phantasm Ball head. The last thing we need to do is we need to smooth our normals. To do that, we're going to go to select, and we're going to go into edge mode. We're going to select one of our edges. We're then going to go to select mode, and we're going to go to we're going to go to convert selection, and we're going to go to edge ring. Then we're going to go select convert selection and then do to edge loop. That should select all the edges like so. And with all those edges selected, we want to go to normals and we want to do soften edge. If you then go back to object component mode and you click off somewhere into space, you should see that we now have a nice, fairly smooth looking Phantasm Ball head, which goes along with our pipes and everything else we've done with the Phantasm Ball. The Phantasm Ball head is now complete, so with our outliner, again, if your outliner isn't open, you can click on this. Mine's off screen for the moment, so I'm going to drag it on here. Our mesh is currently called Polysurface 2, so we're going to rename that to Pball head. But you'll also notice we have some of this other stuff here. This is what was occurring when we were using the booleans, the cubes, and everything else to model and cut the eye holes in our Phantasm Ball head. This is stuff that we would usually want to delete, but we're going to do that as our last step so that we make sure the scene is nice and clean. For the moment, we can ignore these, and that's also why I wanted to rename the essential parts of what we're doing so that junk like this that has been propagated by Maya is easier to identify because it's using whatever naming convention it uses. With the Phantasm Ball head now complete, we're going to select it, and using our move tool, we're going to lift it up. So that way we can position it with the rest of the Phantasm Ball. And with the Phantasm Ball head above everything else, we're going to go back over to our layers, and we're going to turn on the visibility for the Phantasm Ball layer again. As you may or may not notice, this Phantasm Ball head looks a little small. This was by intention, because we want to show you that even once you've done something complex like this, you can still mess with the translation, the rotation, and the scale of the head. So since this head is a little small at the moment, we're going to use our scale tool, and we're going to scale it up so that it's a little bit more appropriately sized. And we're also going to use just the blue square to scale it and make the head a little narrower. Since we want to make sure that everyone has some similar values, we're going to then go over to our channel box. And this scaling has at least given me a sense of what kind of values I want to use for the Phantasm Ball's head scale values. So I'm going to set the X to 1.5, the Y scale to 1.5, and I'm going to set the Z scale to 1.1. That gives us a nice, well-sized head for our Phantasm Ball. Alright, we are now ready for the fifth and final step of creating the Phantasm Ball, which will be creating the Phantasm Ball's antenna. To do this, we're actually not going to turn off the visibility for our Phantasm Ball layer because we want to be able to see what we're doing. We are going to, however, turn the Phantasm Ball layer into transparency mode for a moment. To do that, remember that we want to click on the little R until it's a T, and that will do it. And this also demonstrates, I forgot to do something in our last step, which was add the head to this layer. So we can fix that real quick by clicking on the Phantasm Ball head, right-clicking on the layer and doing Add Selected Objects. Now for the antenna, we're going to use a cylinder again as our base. So we're going to go up to Create, Polygon Primitives, and we're going to create a fresh cylinder. We're then going to use our Move tool to move this cylinder up above the Phantasm Ball's head. And then we're going to be able to turn the Phantasm Ball head back from transparency mode to reference mode. So that way we can see it, but we still can't destroy any of the work we previously did. With this cylinder selected now, we're going to go over to the channel box and layer editor. Again, if this isn't up, you can click on this icon in the upper right hand corner to bring it up. We're going to scroll down to our inputs. And for these inputs, we're going to give it a radius of 1.5. We're going to give it a height of about 8. We're going to use, I believe, 10 subdivisions around the axis. But we're also going to use 7 subdivisions around the height. And the reason we're using subdivisions around the height will become quite clear in a moment. Now, once we have this ready, we need to go into Select, Face Mode. And now we want to select the even numbered column. So we want to select this layer, and we want to select this layer. If you accidentally select too many, remember you can use left control deselect to deselect any faces you've selected accidentally. But with just these 3 layers of the faces selected, we want to go to Edit Mesh, and we want to go to Extrude. And with the extrude tool that is generated, we're going to grab the blue arrow, and we're going to push these faces in so that we have a nice alternating appearance to the Phantasm Ball's antenna. Once that's done, we want to then go to Select, and we want to go to Vertex mode, and we want to select the vertex right here at the very top of the Phantasm Ball head. We're then going to go to the Move tool, and we're going to pull this up so that the top of the antenna has a nice pronounced point to it. You can be a little bit creative at how much of a point this is, but it does need to be a point. And also, pop quiz time. What have I forgotten to do with this cylinder? If you haven't figured it out yet, it's the fact that this cylinder, if we go back to Select Object Mode, this cylinder will be positioned something like this on the Phantasm Ball. That means that these faces on the very bottom of the cylinder, right, these faces here, will never be seen because they're interior faces. So, since they're never going to be seen, we can delete these faces, so we can go Select, go to Face Mode, and we can drag select these, but don't hit the delete key just yet, because if you come back out here and look at your model, you'll see because of how we selected those faces, we've selected some of the other faces here on the top. So we want to deselect those by using the left control, drag select. And that way we should only have these on the very interior here selected, and then we can just hit the delete key to get rid of them. The final thing before we're ready to call this antenna positionable and ready to be used is we want to go to select, go to edge mode, and like we did with the head and the pipes, we need to smooth certain edges on this antenna. To do this, we'll select one of the edges like this one here. We'll then go up to the select menu, go to convert selection. We then want to go to edge ring. We then want to do this again by going to select, convert selection, and we want to go to edge loop. That should select all the vertical edges on this on the antenna polygon, and then like we did with the head and pipes, we want to go to normals, and we want to make sure those edges are soft. So that way, when we go to object component mode and we deselect the antenna, it looks like a nice semi-smooth, semi-round apparatus. The final bit about the antenna is we need to position it and we need to duplicate it, because if you look at the Phantasm Ball's reference picture, you'll notice it has two antennae, not one. To do this, we're first going to press the spacebar and get to our quad view, and we're going to look at the Phantasm Ball from the front view. Scroll using the left alt and the middle mouse button, we'll pan up and we'll select our antenna head. Now, to help us position the antenna so that it stays smooth and in position relative to the head of the Phantasm Ball, we're going to hit the insert key, which will allow us to modify the control point of this particular polygon. We're then going to hold down the V key so we can use vertex snapping, and we're going to move this down just using this upper little line. We're going to vertex snap this down until it's positioned right and even. Sorry, I keep deselecting it by accident. So that it's right where the center of the Phantasm Ball's head is. Once we've done that, we can spacebar. We can hit the insert key to lock the control point in place. We can then spacebar back into quad view and then go back into perspective view. And with the cylinder selected and its new control point where it is, we can go to rotation mode and we can rotate it to the side of the Phantasm Ball's head. For this exercise, we will want to go over to the channel box and layer editor. We want to set the rotate Z to a nice predictable 45-degree angle. That gives us one of the Phantasm Ball's antennas. To make the other one, we will go to Edit, Duplicate, and with that duplicated, we're then going to go over here and we're going to modify the channel box value for the Rotate Z and make it a negative 45 instead of a positive 45. This will present our Phantasm Ball with a lovely pair of antenna. And that will actually finish the tutorial when it comes to modeling the Phantasm Ball. Still, before we call this one done and we save our third version of the Phantasm Ball, that's if you've been saving with me, we want to do a little cleaning on the scene. That way, when it comes to UV unwrapping the Phantasm Ball, we'll have a little bit easier time about it. So, first we're going to go to the window, outliner, and we're going to make sure that we select the two cylinders we've made that are the antenna for the Phantasm Ball, and we're going to rename them Phantasm Ball and Antenna 1 and Phantasm Ball Antenna 2. And now that we've done that, we want to do one more thing before we'll call this model finished and ready for UV unwrapping, and that's that we want to delete the model's history. So that way the Maya scene is clean and the artifacts won't come back to bite us like some things will in Maya. So we're going to go up to Edit, we're going to delete all by type, and we're going to select the history. If you have the outliner open, you'll notice that a bunch of those groups that were created when we were modeling the Phantasm Ball's head have disappeared. That's because Maya has cleaned up their history and deleted them. And you'll also notice that if you click on any object and you scroll down in the channel box, their shape will now just be the Pball antenna and the name, and it won't actually have any input. So be careful with the history, because that will disable your ability to undo some things. But it's also an important process for making sure the scene is clean and ready for the next step. The final thing we'll do is we'll drag select the Phantasm Ball's antennas, and we'll right click on the layer and add them to add the selected objects to our Phantasm Ball layer. And we can verify that everything's added to that layer by clicking on some of these lovely little options here. And with that all done, we have now officially finished modeling the Phantasm Ball, and it's ready for UV unmapping, which will be described in the next tutorial. And to make sure that we save all our nice hard work, we're going to go File, Save As, Pball Tutorial, and I'm going to call this one Pball Tutorial Modeling Done. Just Model. That way I know that this is the version of the file where I've finished modeling the Phantasm Ball, and that this is the version that is ready for UV unmapping. I'll save that, and we are now ready, and with the next tutorial we will start UV unwrapping the Phantasm Ball.